Okay, morning everyone. Welcome back to the Shiur. We are in Sanhedrin, making rapid progress. Page 15a, Tet Vav Amud Aleph. Towards the bottom, if you're in the Vilna Shas, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines up from the bottom. And I will share the screen with you for the Steinsaltz, which is page 79. There we go. So I hope you can see that now. Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we just had a little dipped our toe into the waters of sexual relations with animals and the law around that. So we're going to start from this little symbol here, and the Gemarah is quoting the Mishnah. I'm going to take you right back to the Mishnah now. It's on page 8 of the Steinsaltz, if you want to see it. There it is. This is the Mishnah, and the Mishnah said, Dinei nefashot be'esrim u'shlosha. Capital cases where there is the death penalty potentially. We need 23 judges. We knew that already. And we knew it from this Mishnah, which we learned a few years ago. But then the Mishnah goes on to say, Harovea v'hanirba be'esrim u'shlosha. Anybody who has sexual relations with an animal, either in an active manner or a passive manner, the case must be judged by 23 people. Shne'emah, because it quotes a pasuk in Vayikra chapter 20, V'haragta et ha'isha et ha'behima, and you shall kill the woman and the animal. And then it goes on to say, V'omer v'et ha'behima taharogu, and the animal you shall kill. Now let's have a look at the two verses directly. Let me stop that share and let's go to the pesukim, which I've got ready. And I'll just share with you now. There we are. Now, so verse 15 says, Jeffrey, are you with us?
A man who lies with an animal shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. Stop there. So that seems very straightforward. A man who lies with an animal shall be put to death. That's a capital case. So therefore, we need 23 judges. So my first question, just on that pasuk, on half of that pasuk, is why do we need the second bit of the Mishnah? Remember, the Mishnah said capital cases are dealt with by 23 judges. And then it went on to say that somebody who has relations with an animal, also 23. Why do we need that? Because we know that already, because the pasuk tells us that he should be put to death, which means it's a capital case. So as we know, the Mishnah wouldn't say it just stam. There must be something that the Mishnah is hinting at or telling us that we couldn't already know from the first part of the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah said, Dinei nefashot, capital cases, are dealt with by 23 people. We didn't need to be told the specific case of the one who lies with an animal. That's question number one. Now, read the rest of the verse for us, Jeffrey. I stopped you halfway through. A man who lies with an animal shall be surely put to death. And you shall kill the animal.
Okay, that seems straightforward. Right. Now, the question that we're going to ask in the Gemara is around this part of the pasuk. Because as we've just said, the first part of the pasuk is dealt with by the all-inclusive part of the Mishnah that says capital cases are dealt by 23. But what about the animal? So the next piece of Gemara that we're going to be dealing with is going to be dealing with how many judges are required for the animal to be killed, not the person, because we know that already. Now, let's just read verse 16 now.
And a woman who comes close to any animal so that it will mate with her, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. Okay,
now, that obviously is the parallel pasuk to 15. 15 is the active act where the man is active with the woman, and verse 16 is the where a woman is passive with the animal. I'm sorry that we have to discuss these things. It's not very pleasant, but nevertheless, it's a legal questions that we're dealing with, not the physical acts. So we have to just put those to one side. Now, verse 16 should bother you. Why should it bother you? And does verse 16 bother anyone?
Well, I'm not sure what it means who comes close to. Does that mean that they lie with the animal, or does it mean
what it means is that the woman brings the animal and enables the animal.
Okay.
It doesn't say so that it does mate. It just says so that it will mate.
Okay, let's assume that it means that
you're tempting the animal.
It's a good question. I don't think that there would be the capital punishment for the seduction of an animal. I think that there has to be the act would have to take place before she was chayav mita, before she was liable for the death penalty. Although I can understand why you say that, because it does read like that. It reads that even if she attempts it and it doesn't happen, you shall kill her. But I don't think that's the halacha. I think the act has to happen. What bothers you
and it's also sort of doubled up, isn't it? So that it's you shall kill the woman and the animal, they shall surely be put to death. Whereas
exactly, Julia, there is a superfluous expression here. You shall kill the woman and the animal, they shall surely be put to death. What do you learn extra from the fact that it says they shall surely be put to death? If it didn't say that, you would still know that they would be killed because it says so. So the question that Julia has raised is in fact a very good question. And that is what the Gemara is going to be discussing in a roundabout sort of way. So these are the pesukim on which this Gemara is based. So the man who lies with an animal shall be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. That's a very straightforward verse. The second one, the woman, a little bit more difficult to understand. The questions that were raised about whether the act has to take place, it's not clear entirely. And then, importantly, for the legal aspects of this, and for the point of view of explaining the pesukim, we have this double expression which we need to put some meaning to, because we can't have superfluous words in the Torah. Okay, so those are the pesukim. Let's then go back to the Gemara. Okay, there it is. So the Gemara says, Dinei nefashot be'esrim ushlosha. It quotes that first part of the Mishnah, expecting us to know the next part, which is that the man or woman who get involved with an animal are also dealt with by 23 judges. Harovea, that's the active party. The Hanirba, that's the passive party. So Harovea would be the man who copulates with an animal. The Hanirba, that is the woman who allows herself to be copulated to with an animal. But Esrim Ushlosha, for 20, that they need 23 judges for that. Shenema, and it quotes a pasuk, V'haragta et ha'isha ve'et ha'behema, and it quotes verse 2016. That is the passive one. V'omer ve'et ha'behema ta'arogu, and you shall kill the animal. It's the passive, the active one in the verse 15. Okay, Steinsaltz says, in the cases of bestiality, the verse juxtaposes the execution of the animal to the execution of the person, and therefore the case of the animal is adjudicated in the same way as cases of capital law. So, because the pesukim lump together, that is a less fancy word than juxtapose, okay, but that's what it means. Right? Because they lump together the animal punishment and the human's punishment, the Gemarah learns from that the judicial process which is required, i.e. 23 judges, is the same. Okay, straightforward. Now, if we stopped there, we'd all be happy and understand the pesukim and understand the Mishnah. But the Gemarah is now going to raise some issues.
Johnny, excuse me, when he's saying separate, should have a separate court case for the animal?
I imagine so. Yeah, I imagine so, because you would have to hear the evidence. I mean, I imagine it would be sort of done at the same time, because the evidence is going to be the same. But in the people's case, you're going to concentrate on what the people did. In the animal's case, you're going to concentrate on what the animal did. I imagine that there would be two separate cases because you're having two separate verdicts.
Yeah.
Good question, though. Right. So the Gemarah then goes on to ask another question, or to tell us another question. Okay, says the Gemarah like this. We have now established that an ox, well, it doesn't have to be an ox, any animal that is involved in copulation with a human is put to death, and you need 23 judges for that. So the next question that the Gemarah addresses in a sort of side issue, what about animals that are put to death not because they have copulated with humans, but for another reason? Do they also need 23 judges? So in other words, the question that the Gemarah is asking is this 23 judges for the animal only because it involves at the same time the death of a human being, because of they were intimately involved with one another? Or is it the case that any animal that is put to death requires the full 23 court? That's the question. Okay, so now we've got another case. Shor haniskal, an ox which needs to be stoned. Be'esrim u'shlosha, says the Mishnah. An ox which is fitting to be stoned needs 23 judges. Now, does anybody know the case where an ox is put to death by stoning? When would an ox be put to death by stoning?
When it's habitually killed another animal more than once or more than twice.
Killed another animal. Well, let's have a look and see. Steinsaltz helps us out by telling us where to go. Shmot chapter 21, and that is where we will go now. we are. Jeffrey, verse 28 and 29, please. Nice and loud.
And if a bull gores a man or a woman, and that one dies, the bull shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, and the owner of the bull is clear. But if it is habitually goring bull, since yesterday and the day before yesterday, and its owner had been warned, but he did not guard it, and it puts to death a man or a woman, the bull shall be stoned, and also its owner shall be put to death.
Okay, so we have two situations here. So Michael was right, but not 100% right. Michael said a bull is stoned if it is habitually killing another animal. And actually the pesukim are talking about bulls that kill people. And a bull who kills a person even once is actually put to death. What Michael was getting a little bit mixed up with, that if it is a habitual gorer and its owner has been warned, then the owner is put to death in the habitual situation, which is not the case in the one-off situation. So Michael was there or thereabouts with his answer there. So we are talking about a bull who has gored a man or a woman, and the person dies. The bull shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. Why is that? Why is the flesh not eaten?
It's not killed kosherly, not kosher, the way it's been killed.
Okay, that's possibly true. Yeah, that's absolutely true, actually. I hadn't thought of that. But you're right, it can't possibly be eaten. But it can't be eaten by a Jew, could be eaten by a goy. Not according to this, its flesh shall not be eaten, means it can't be eaten by anyone. So you're right, Johnny, it can't be eaten by a Jew. But what about a goy? Why can't it be eaten by a goy?
Because there might be something the matter with the meat if the bull is vicious.
Okay, so Jakob Creutzfeldt disease then, mad cow disease. We don't want to get involved with a mad cow, possibly, but I don't think that's the reason. It's a good suggestion. I like it, but I don't think that's the reason. Any other suggestions why the flesh should not be eaten?
Possibly so that the person who owns it shouldn't be paid for its value.
Yes, correct. It's a fine. It's a fine. Correct, Julia. Normally, if you had a bull that you were rearing and what have you, you would sell it for meat. If you weren't using it for stud, it's not going to give you milk because it's a bull. So what do you do with it? Well, you shecht it for meat. And so if you stone this animal and then you sell the meat to a non-Jewish person, well, you've not really had a punishment, have you? You've not really, you've not lost anything, really.
I think that what you're saying is confirmed by the next paragraph, which doesn't state about the meat not being eaten, and I suppose you wouldn't benefit from it if you're killed yourself, so that would be automatic.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. And I hadn't noticed that either, but that's correct. The next verse says, Jeffrey, 29 again.
But if it is a habitually goring bull since yesterday and the day before yesterday, and its owner had been warned, but he did not guard it, and it puts to death a man or a woman, the bull shall be stoned, and also its owner shall be put to death.
Okay, very good, Julia. I hadn't noticed that the flesh is not eaten there. And you're right, of course. If he's going to be put to death, the owner, then it doesn't matter. His fine is not really relevant, except you could say it's relevant to his estate. But there is a halachic principle there is a halachic principle, and that is that a person who is put to death, if there are two punishments for a person for one particular event, then he is given the most severe of the two punishments and not the other one. Okay, there's a halachic principle there. So the halachic principle here is if he's put to death, any fine that he owes on that particular act doesn't come into play. And so that would fit in very nicely with what you have said. These phones are going like crazy. Let's turn them off. Yes, very good indeed. So this is the story we're talking about now. We're talking about a bull that gores. Let's go back to the Gemarah and see what the Gemarah is talking about now. Right, back into the Gemarah. So, Shor HaNiskal be'esrim u'shlosha, an ox that needs to be stoned is judged by 23 judges, and it quotes the pasuk, Hashor yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat. So this is the second pasuk there that Jeffrey read, verse 29. The ox is stoned, and also the owner is put to death. Says the Gemarah, Ka mitat ba'alim. Ka. What does ka mean? Like, correct. Like the death of the owners, kach mitat hashor. Similarly is the death of the ox. In other words, the same judicial process that has to be gone through for the death penalty for the owner, similarly, the same judicial process must be gone through for the death of the animal. Okay, fine. So, says the Gemarah, says the translation here. From this verse, it is derived that just as the manner of the death of the owner, so is the manner of the death of the ox. That is due to the juxtaposition, or the lumping together, of the man and the animal's death. Now, the Gemarah now extends this idea. Yes, Julia, are you troubled by something?
I'm troubled because you're saying the Gemarah, but aren't we looking at the Mishnah at the moment?
The Mishnah is up to here. Kemitat Baalim Kach Mitat Ashor. That's Gemarah.
Right.
That's the explanation of the Mishnah.
Okay.
So now the Gemarah goes on and says that we extend this halacha now. Haza'ev. What's a za'ev?
It's a wolf.
A wolf, correct. Ha'ari. What's an ari?
A lion.
A lion. And hadov, a bear. That's right. V'hanamer. What's a namer?
A leopard.
A leopard. V'habardalas, and a cheetah. Bardalas is a cheetah. V'hanachash, you know what that one is?
It's a snake.
Snake. Mitatan be'esrim u'shlosha. Okay. Their death is with 23 judges. Now, why would they be put to death? Why would you want to kill this lion or bear or cheetah?
They've killed somebody.
Killed somebody, correct. It's an extension of the ox. These are wild animals as opposed to domestic animals. So with the domestic animal, with the shor, the ox has an owner. So there's an onus on the owner, pardon the pun. There's an onus on the owner to look after the ox, which is why it happens once. The owner is naki. He's clear. He's not obligated. He's not liable for any punishment, because it can happen. Accidents can happen. But if he's a habitual gorer and the owner has been warned, in other words, that you've got. It's the same with a dog, right? If you own a dog, if a dog bites somebody for the first time, well, that could be a one-off. But once that dog has bitten somebody once, you are on notice as the owner that your dog is a biter. So you have got a responsibility to look after it. You put a muzzle on it, you lock it away, you put a leash on it, or whatever you do. If you then allow your dog to bite somebody else and don't look after it properly and don't guard it properly, well, then everybody, right-minded person would say, well, the owner is responsible. You knew that dog was a biter. It's because it's done it before. So therefore, you have a responsibility. That's the concept of the Shor HaNiskal, the ox who has previously gored somebody, and he does it again.
Isn't there some similarity, Johnny, to the case we learned before? I can't remember the details. Also, man and woman sexually involved. If the man's warned about it, they have to have Aiden that have warned him, I think.
Yes, well, yes, there has to be a warning before. You're right. That before any capital punishment is carried out, there have to be two witnesses, and there have to be a warning before the act. In other words, one of those witnesses has to have said to the person, you do know, don't you, that if you do this act, you will be liable for the death penalty. And he says, I know, I don't care, I'm doing it anyway. Okay? In that scenario, he is liable for the death penalty. If he's not warned by one of the witnesses, then he may well not be liable for the death penalty. Which brings me to my next question. There's a question here. Let me go back to the pesukim, because I forgot to ask you this question. Sorry that I'm flitting back and forth, but that's just the way it is today. We need the pesukim open and we need the Gemarah. So here we're back to the pesukim. I have a question which you should have had on verse 29, having read verse 28. What is it?
Yes. Something to do with yesterday and the day before yesterday?
Not really.
No, okay.
What's bothering you? David, can you tell me something that's bothering you in verses 28 and 29?
Yeah, the ox is stoned, but the owner shall die. And it's not talking about the method of punishment, and well, this is the continuation of the Gemarah. I've got a bigger problem, because the Gemarah that you've just read out and the continuation isn't in the Vilna Shas. I was lost for a few minutes. Did you notice that as well?
I did notice that. Yeah, I did notice that.
There's a whole chunk left out of the Vilna Shas.
Yeah, and I suspect that's because these animals were not that well known to the Vilna Shas folk in Europe when the Vilna Shas was put together.
No. I think it's to do with the manuscript that's being used.
Yeah, and I think
found this from a different manuscript.
I think that's right. But I think the reason they're not bothered by it.
The next part of the Gemarah is also missing in the Vilna.
Okay, we'll come to that in a sec. Okay, let's just go on to this problem here. What is inconsistent with verses 28 and 29, please? Okay, let me help you out. What does verse 28 say about a bull that gores a man or a woman?
it's got to die.
It's going to die.
It's to die.
Okay.
The
So
owner.
therefore, how can verse 29 ever occur? How can you ever have a habitually goring ox? Because the first time it gores, it's put to death. So how can it make it? How can it do it again?
It's a different bull.
It doesn't
die the first
necessarily. It doesn't necessarily say that the man or the woman dies. In the first verse, it says if a bull gores a man or woman and that one, i.e. the person, dies. But in the second one, it just says a habitually goring bull. So you don't need to have died.
Okay, so you're suggesting, that a habitually goring bull, which doesn't
Could
kill
cause
anyone, it
injury.
just gores,
Yes.
is put to death. Okay. Yeah, you could learn that from the pasuk. I'm not sure if that's the halacha or not. I'd have to look that up. A goring ox, which gores but doesn't kill, is it put to death?
Well, it also could mean that it may or may not end in death. That may or may not be the conclusion. It leaves it open.
Sorry, what may not be the conclusion?
The goring, it may conclude in death or it may not. It leaves it open as to whether it does or doesn't.
Okay. All right, I need to look that up. David, do you know what about whether the halacha is a goring bull that doesn't kill? I've got a feeling that a goring bull to be put to death has to kill, but I could be wrong. I need to look it up. But it's a good suggestion, Julia. Any other suggestions as to how you can get a habitually goring bull if you're going to put it to death after the first one?
In the first case, it says the person died. In 28, it says the person dies. In the second one, it implies that this bull has been goring before, but hasn't killed anybody. That's the only thing it can be.
Yeah, that's what Julia. That was Julia's point as well. Okay. Any other suggestions? Okay, I have a suggestion. And that is that the bull gores. The case does not come to court immediately the same day. There's obviously a delay before you can get a court case together. Everybody's got to have their evidence in line, and they've got to do their investigations. The court's got to be convened. You've got to get the 23 judges. There's going to be a delay between the goring and the court case. So this habitually goring bull, since yesterday and the day before yesterday, I don't think that necessarily it's hinting that it was like straight away on 3 consecutive days. I think that's just an expression. But I think that one of the possible explanations is that this bull has gored again and again before it gets tried for its first goring, because there's going to be a delay between, and I think that makes makes sense, because if somebody has a goring bull and then he didn't do it for a long, and let's say he didn't get killed for whatever reason, and it didn't do it for a long time after that, you might let your guard down and say, that was just a one-off. But if you've had a goring bull yesterday or the day before, you should be very, very careful early on, because you never know when it's going to do it again. And I think that this habitually goring bull is a situation where it does it a few times before it comes to court. So, but I think your answer is a better answer, Julia, if it's right, if the halacha is right. I need to look that up, which I will Belineda do. Okay, let's go back and let's go back into the Steinsaltz Gemarah, which is not in the Vilna Shas. You know, it's funny you should say all of that, David, because when I was preparing last night, I was actually preparing from the Vilna Shas, and I'm looking at this now, and I didn't remember it, but I thought, well, maybe I just didn't remember it. But Actually, you pointed out that it's not that my memory is so bad that I can't remember from one night to the next. It just wasn't there. So let's reshare the screen. There we go. So the wolf, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the cheetah and the snake, they are also dealt with by 23 judges. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer said, Kol hakodem lahargan zacha. Rabbi Eliezer says something different. What does Rabbi Eliezer say? He says, don't wait around for a court to judge, 23 judges. Get up there and kill the thing. If you've got a dangerous animal there that's caused the death of somebody, he says, Kol hakodem, anybody who goes forward, yeah? Kodem means to be first, right? Kol hakodem zocher. What does that mean? In modern Hebrew, kol hakodem zocher. What does that mean in modern Hebrew if you use that expression? Literally translated means all of those who come forward merit. It means in English we would say first come, first served. So if you see something written or somebody says in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, that there's a special offer at the supermarket, kol hakodem zocher, that means first come, first served. Okay, but here it means kol hakodem lahargan, from harag, to kill. Yeah, anybody who comes forward to kill the wild animal, the dangerous wild animal, zacha, is merit. In other words, he's done a good thing, and you don't have to wait for 23 judges. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, no, you can't do that. Mitatan be'esrim u'shlosha. You need to go through the due judicial process and have a court case of 23 judges. We can't be having people getting up and just taking the law into their own hands and killing wild animals. I suppose if you were there in a situation where the wild animal posed a danger to society or a person at that time, well, that would be completely different. But here, Rabbi Akiva is saying that the proper judicial process has to be gone through, and it's only correct that their death is decreed by 23 judges.
It's pikuach nefesh, isn't it?
Yes, if it's pikuach nefesh, then you do it. But here, obviously, Rabbi Akiva is not suggesting that you allow the thing to kill somebody else while you're waiting for it to be tried. He's talking about a situation where you have, I suppose, managed to restrain the animal, locked it in a cage or something. Rabbi Eliezer is saying, never mind all that, just kill the blooming thing and be done with it. So there's a distinction. I'm looking now in the...
Steinfeld says there's a mitzvah as well to do that.
Yes, zacha. Zacha. Can you see the word zacha?
Yeah.
It means he merits. He merits a mitzvah. He's done a meritorious act. And David is right as well. This whole next bit of Gemarah about the Shevet and the Navi Sheker, I don't see any of that in the Gemarah. In the Vilna Shas. I don't remember it from last night, and it's not there. But we'll do it anyway, since it's in front of us. So I haven't got these pesukim ready because I hadn't seen them until just now, because it's not in the Vilna Shas. Interesting that. I wonder, does Steinsaltz make any comment about this being missing in different versions? Doesn't seem to, does he? Surprising that, isn't it? Okay, well, let's do it anyway, because it's there to be done. Ein danin lo et hashevet Veloet Navi HaSheker, Veloet Kohen Gadol, Ela al pi bet din shel shivim ve'echad. Now, was that in the Mishnah? Let's have a look. Let's go back to page. Oh, we're in the Mishnah.
We're in the
Let's go back to the Gemarah. That's where my mistake is. I'm not in the Gemarah. I'm in the Mishnah. Julia was right all along. Sorry, Julia, you were right. I was on the wrong page. That's the problem with being on a screen and not in a book.
No. I tell you what the problem is, Johnny. It is in the Gemarah. It's in a different order.
Right. Let's deal with it in the order of the Gemarah. And let's just whiz through here. I'm just going to quickly look through here.
It's in the Stein results on 15b3.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. Ha'ariva Azev, etc. And is that in our Mishnah? Let's go back to the Mishnah in the Vilna Shas. Let's go into the Vilna Shas. See, it is there in the Vilna Shas in the Mishnah. If you look in the Mishnah on the Vilna Shas, Bet Amud Bet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down, 9 lines down. It is there in the Gemarah, in the Mishnah, and it's dealt with later on in the Gemarah because we've not finished dealing with the first bit. That was all my mistake because I was in the Mishnah and not in the Gemarah. Apologies for that. Let's go back to the Mishnah now. And if you're not completely confused by that, then you should be. Right. So here we go. Bottom of page 79. The Gemarah says, Kmitata ba'alim kach mitata shor. So the owner is put to death same way as the ox, or the other way round. The ox is put to death same way as the owner. Now, here's the Gemarah that we're going to discuss now, which I prepared. Amale Abaye la Rava. Abaye says to Rava, Mimai dahai v'gam ba'alav yumat. From the verse, Abaye said to Rava, from where do we know, Mimai, from where do we know that this expression, v'gam ba'alav yumat, and also its owner should be put to death? Lichmitat ba'alim. How do we know that juxtaposition is telling us about the death of the owner and the animal being the same? How do we know that? How do we know that lichmitat ba'alim kachmitat ashor hu da'ata, that is coming? Maybe there's another reason. Says Abaye la Rava. Now we're over the page now onto 15b. Ema, perhaps, maybe we should say, liktala hu da'ata. It's just telling you the simple fact that the owner gets the death penalty. Okay? Hu da'ata. Ema, say, liktala, for the death penalty, hu da'ata, it's coming. Let's go back to the pesukim. Let's go back to the pesukim. Okay, here, this is what we're talking about, the end of verse 29. So verse 29 says if it's a habitually goring animal, then it gets put to death, and its owner shall be put to death. So far, the Gemarah has said, because of that juxtaposition, we can compare the death of the owner, which is with 23 judges, because it's a capital case, to the death of the animal. Therefore, the death of the animal must be with 23 judges. Abaye says to Rava, why are you driving me mad? Why can't you just say that the pasuk that says its owner shall be put to death means its owner shall be put to death? It's just there to tell you that the owner gets the death sentence. Why do you need to learn something else from it? And in fact, says Abaya to Rava, we know the law, don't we? The rule is you can only learn one thing from one pasuk or one issue in a pasuk. You can't bring multiple learnings from one thing. So if it means its owner shall be put to death, then that's what it means. And you can't use that to compare the death of the owner to the death of the animal. That's a biased question to Rava. Why are you getting all complicated? It means what it says on the can. It says its owner shall be put to death, and that's what it means. That's a biased question to Rava. And so let's have a look at Rava's answer now. Back to the Gemarah. Says the Gemarah, in Cain, says this is Rava back to Abaya. They're having this discussion. Rava says, oh, well, in that case, Lichtov, it should have written, V'gam ba'alav, v'lishtok, and be quiet. So in other words, it should have said, the animal is put to death, V'gam ba'alav, and also its owner. The fact that it says, V'gam ba'alav yumat, shall be put to death, is an extra word. We didn't need that word. That extra word, says Abaya. The pasuk would have made sense. Sorry about this, but again, back to the pasuk. We could have just said, here's the pasuk. The habitually goring ox is put to death, and also its owner, full stop. But it doesn't. It says, and also its owner shall be put to death. Abaya's answer, beg your pardon, Rava's answer to Abaya says, we don't need this Hebrew word yumot, shall be put to death. It would have been enough to finish the sentence over here at Gam Be'alav. The bull shall be stoned, and also its owner, full stop. So, says Rava, the fact that the pasuk says yumat, that's an extra thing, and that is what I am using for my explanation of how we can work out that the animal needs 23 judges to be put to death, because we didn't need that word yumot. I agree with you, says Rava to Abaye, that gam ba'alav means the owner is put to death, but we didn't need that extra word. Those 4 letters, yumat, means that there's something extra to be learned from those 4 words, those 4 letters we didn't need. And what we learn is that the animal is compared to the owner in the manner of its trial for the death penalty. Okay, so that at the moment, Abaya has kicked Rava's question into touch, but Rava is not. Abaya is not yet finished. Rava has kicked his question into touch, but he's not yet finished. We'll go back.
You could learn something else from that, couldn't you? You could learn that the owner isn't to be stoned, but is to be put to death a different way.
Ah, very good, Julia. Either you've looked ahead,
no,
or you've learnt this in a previous life, or you're just very, very clever, because that is exactly what the Gemarah is going to talk about soon. I don't think we'll get to it today, but it's coming up. The method of punishment is coming up, and in fact, that is the discussion that is coming up is exactly as Julia has just said. I just said to you that Abaya hadn't yet finished with his questions. Well, the question that Julia has just raised is coming up very soon. Let's have a look at the Gemarah. Let's go off the pesukim and back to the Gemarah. This is becoming a little bit burdensome, but never mind. There's no other way I can do it, really. There we go, back into the Gemarah. So let's just say the words. Im kain, if so, lichtov v'gam ba'alav. It should have just said ba'alav. V'lishtok. Lishtok means be silent. Be silent. In other words, don't finish off the pasuk. Okay, Abaya said. Now Abaya comes back and says, "I katav rachmana hachi." If rachmana, what's the root of that word? Rachmana. Yes, Julia, mercy. So what is rachmana here in this context?
Rachmanus.
Rachmanus, yes. And who has the most rachmanus?
The Almighty.
The Almighty. Rachmana is an expression used by the Gemara for Hashem's name. It's one of Hashem's names, if you like, the merciful one. Okay, and you can see in the Steinsaltz translation, merciful one is used with capital letters to indicate that we're talking about the Almighty. So we would say the Almighty, which is Ribono Shel Olam, the Master of the universe. Okay, Rachmana is the merciful one. So, I katav Rachmana hachi. If the merciful one, i.e. Hashem, who wrote the Torah, had written it in that way, Hava Amina, I would have thought, yes, we are going to get to it today, Julia. I would have thought, Biskila, I would have thought that the owner would be executed by stoning. Why would I have thought that? Well, let's ask Julia, because she said so. Why would you think that the owner would be stoned if the Torah had just written V'gam ba'alav and not written shall be put to death?
Because it says and also.
And also, correct. The ox is being stoned. We've just been told that. And also the owner indicates that he would also be put to death by stoning. Says Abaya, Biskila solka daitach? Really? So it's in a rhetorical question. Salka da'atach. Would it enter? Da'atach. Da'at. What's da'at?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. Oh, yes. Would it enter your knowledge? In other words, would it enter your mind? Would you even think such a thing? So it's a Gemarah expression which you'll see over again. Salka daitach means it enters your mind. It's a rhetorical question here. Biskila salka daitach? Really? Would it enter your mind that this fellow, this owner of the ox, would be stoned to death? Katal ihu b'sayif. If he had killed a person, how is the death penalty carried out for somebody who murders another person? The Gemara tells us, b'sayif. What's a sayif? It's not a Hebrew word. Yes, Michael, it's a sword. Sayif is a sword. It's not a Hebrew word, I don't think. I think it comes from what's the Hebrew word for sword? Anybody know? Yes, go on.
Cherev.
Yes, cherev. Cherev, very good, Johnny. Cherev is a sword in Hebrew. Sayif sounds like a foreign word to me. We're not told. Sometimes it tells us the word here, but I don't think it's a Hebrew word. But we'll find. I'll have a look at that as well. Anyway, the point is that a person who kills another person is killed by the sword. Now, mamono biskila, somebody who damages the money or the property of another person, could he possibly be stoned to death, which is a more severe execution? How many executions are there? How many types of execution are there in Jewish law? Does anybody know that?
Skila, Serefa. That's two.
Go on. Skila. What's skila?
Stoning.
Stoning. Srefa.
With the sword.
No.
Burning.
Burning. Yes.
And I presume the sword is another one.
Cherev is the sword,
Yeah.
yes.
3.
Or hereg is the sword. And the last one?
Judy, you're muted.
A rope.
Say again, Jeffrey.
Hanging.
Yes, in a way. Yes, in a way, hanging. It's called chenek. What does chenek mean?
Strangulation.
Strangulation, yes. So it's a sort of type of hanging, isn't it? So yes, skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek. That's how it's going. Skila, sreifa, hereg, v'chenek. In that order of severity. So the most severe punishment is stoning, followed by burning, followed by decapitation, the sword, followed by strangulation, which was not actually a hanging. It wasn't done by hanging, but it's the same sort of idea. It was actually done with a scarf. I think we might be going to be learning that later on in Masechet Sanhedrin, where we actually learn about the 4 types of stoning, 4 types of capital punishment. It's late, yes, David?
In gruesome detail.
In gruesome detail. Which parak is it in, David?
Oh, it's about
later on.
8. It's I think the parak's called Abba Mitot Beit Din.
Yeah, we'll get there in a few years.
Yeah, years.
Good few years, so you don't need to worry too much about it right now. But we will go into it in very gruesome detail. So yes, Jeffrey, it's not actual hanging, but I mean, it works out the same way. They use a thin scarf, and we'll go into it in a few years' time. But anyway, there's 4 types of capital punishment in order of severity, in descending order of severity, i.e. the most severe. First, stoning, burning, decapitation, strangulation. So the Gemarah says here, let's go back to the Gemarah again. Gemarah says over here, a person, katal, somebody who kills another person, ihu basayif, he is killed by the sword, he's decapitated. Mamono, somebody that damages another person's property or kills another person's ox, which is in effect causing him a monetary loss. Beskila, how could you possibly think that he would get a more severe punishment than the person who kills another person? So, says Abaya, your answer, Rava, that we don't need the word yumat to teach us about the person is going to be put to death, is wrong. Is wrong. So I'm still in with a chance, says Abaya. I think that when it says v'gam ba'alav yumat, and also the owner is put to death, what it means is, and also the owner is put to death. I don't see that you can compare the 23 judges' business with the animal and the person using that expression, because we need it to tell us that the person is put to death, and he's put to death by strangulation. Now, how do I know he's put to death by strangulation according to Abaye? Because wherever the Torah does not designate a type of punishment, then it is the most lenient of them, which is strangulation. Okay.
What does it mean, Johnny, in the paragraph before? Can you just go back a minute? When it says in the not the last paragraph, the one before, so shall be put to death. No, where have you gone now? Go back to the bottom.
Oh, you want the pasuk?
No, just the bottom of the page. Shall be put to death. That's all I can see. Yeah, shall be put to death. It is clear that the owner, I'll read it from mine. It is clear that the intention is to teach that just as the manner of the death of the owner, so is the manner of the death of the ox. That means I understand that the way the owner's killed, the ox is killed the same.
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean that. When it says the manner of, it means the manner of the trial. The 23 judges bit.
Okay.
you're right. It's not entirely clear, but that's what it means. It's comparing the trial process.
Right.
Like the trial process of the owner, so is the trial process of the animal. And then we have this discussion between Rava and Abaya about this, the end of the pasuk, Gam ba'alav yumat, and also the owner will be put to death. So we'll stop there now because we're out of time. We're going to carry on with this discussion between Abaya and Rava about these few words of a Gam ba'alav yumat, and specifically about that word yumat, what that we can learn from that one word. Abaya is keen to learn this comparison of the trial process from it. No, Rava is keen to learn from the trial process. Abaye is keen to say, no, it's just what it says. It means the owner is put to death. And we're just in the middle of this ping pong now between Abaya and Rava. It's a really interesting discussion, and we can see how we'll see next week a bit more how how sophisticated the arguments were, and how subtle the arguments were, and it's wonderful to see, and it's something, by the way, that when I first learned Gemarah when I was very young, I never appreciated at all, and the more I learn Gemarah now with you guys, the more I realize that it is absolutely wrong and counterproductive to be teaching kids of 10, 11 and 12 Gemarah, because not only do they not get the subtleties and appreciate the subtleties of all of this, it actually puts you off, because you can't get most of the nuances you can't get at that age. I was a reasonably intelligent kid and I had no idea of what was going on, and it's only as an adult, and even when I learned it as an adult, because I'd been put off by the poor teaching that I had when I was a kid, I never really thoroughly enjoyed it until I started learning with this particular I'm enjoying it because I'm going at my pace, but the sophistication and the detail and the nuances of these people who are sat around discussing all of this, it's mind-blowing when you stop and think about it for a few minutes. The greatness of these minds, whether you agree with the arguments or you don't, whether you agree with Abaya or you agree with Rava, or whichever way you prefer to look at it, doesn't make any difference. It's the sophistication and the subtlety of the argument which really I find very very amazing and very uplifting. Any questions?
Your grounding, Johnny, in Reb Herschel's class in Manchester Yeshiva, or he might not have understood it then, messing around as well, everything in the class, but it's certainly a grounding to remember it. It's coming back to me now. Just
the thing was, though, Johnny,
it sticks in your mind.
the thing was, Johnny, that I was only in Reb Herschel's share for a very short period of time.
So was I.
Because I was so young when I went to the yeshiva, I was only 10. I spent 3 years in the other person's share, who we won't mention, and was thoroughly put off by it before I even got to Reb Herschel's share. By the time I got to Reb Herschel's share when I was 13, because you couldn't go into Reb Herschel's share until after your bar mitzvah, I'd had 3 years of being told that, we've got to get on and your questions, are slowing us down and blah, 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 blah. So you're probably right. Had I been in Reb Herschel's share from the beginning, I might not have been so negative, which tells us something about how important the teaching is.
Yeah, you remember the things that you learned in those days. They come back.
I remember the concepts, but
that's what I'm saying. I
don't remember it. I don't remember it fondly. That's the sadness.
When we finish recording, can I say something?
Yes, we'll stop recording now. Any questions on the Gemarah before I stop recording? Okay, we'll stop recording now, and we'll see you all next week on the recording.